Ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to all of you. It's so nice to see everyone, and uh, we actually didn't expect so many people joining us. So we are really thank you. We hope you, your family, and your colleagues all are staying safe during the lockdown. My name is Neerav Singh, and on behalf of iASYS, I welcome you all to this webinar on adapting to the new normal and expediting development and validation trials remotely in times of lockdown and post-lockdown. Uh, I know the COVID-19 crisis brings unprecedented times for our industry, but like every other times, be it emission challenge or vehicle safety challenge, the automotive industry is known to always pull up its strengths and emerge back stronger. So with the same passion, we resonate in this webinar what it takes to strengthen development and validation in near and future scenario. For those of who don't know him, many of you know him, I would take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Puran Parekh, sir, who is going to present this session. Mr. Puran Parekh holds a master's degree in electronic system design and engineering and is founder, chairman, and managing director of 21-year-old company iASYS, an Indian multinational company having business in Japan, UK, Germany, USA, and China. Along with overseeing day-to-day organizational activities, his main role is global business development and new product conceptualization using latest engineering and IT technologies. He has a reputation globally where he has worked with international OEMs and organizations. For example, iASYS is associated with ASAM, that is Association for Standardization of Automotive Measurements, since 2007. And Mr. Puran was part of board of directors of ASAM from 2009 to 2013. ASAM is a non-profit organization where today it has 500 plus members, including leading OEMs, tier 1 suppliers, and tool vendors. 12 years back, he helped them in setting vision of test data standardization. Since then, Mr. Puran has been actively involved in creating a vibrant ASAM community in Japan and North America. Recently, he's working with ASAM and other research groups in Germany, Japan, and USA in setting up vision for standardization of future driving automation, or I must say autonomous driving. We proposed a scenario, a description method using ontology. He has been crucial part of many workshops and seminars. However, this is his first time doing a webinar for iASYS, and we are hoping to make this count for you so that you have enough takeaways from this session. Without taking further time, let's start this webinar. I welcome Puran sir. The virtual stage is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Neerav, and thank you very much for your entire team who has helped me in bringing all the presentation together. And as you all know, I am very, very poor in making the presentations. So please bear with me. First of all, good morning, all of you. And thank you very much for your time, because even though it looks lockdown, but I know, and whenever I talk to many of my friends within the automotive industry, I found that they are busy since morning 8 till evening 8 in different kind of seminars and conferences and reviews and designs and so on. And we were really humbled and really feel very proud that this 21 year of journey what we had. And I think this is what is our achievement, that at least our friends are really here to listen. And I will try my best to put together all my experience of 21 years into this industry and try to have a different perspectives across and probable solutions and how we take this as a challenge. So today's topic, we talked about mainly adopting the new normals. So I believe that we already know all what these new normals look like, that, we are in this a challenging and a not so good situation about this pandemic, which is like affecting global people. And this is also give us an idea that how we are no more isolated alone, or a society alone, or a country alone, but we are all part of this global community or a global society. And this is, I believe, that is the first time in our lifetime we saw such a massive level of influence of this. And I know 100,000 people, more than 150,000 people are already, passed away. And it was really unfortunate that till now, we don't have any sight that how and when we'll come out of that. So, of course, challenge will keep coming in our lifetime, and we'll keep seeing up in terms of the industry or in terms of social or pandemic and so on. But I think one thing which always motivates we as a human, that we always take that upfront and keep moving forward. And I believe this is one thing, this is our strength as a human being, that we'll always take this as a challenge and move forward. Now here, when we talk about the new normal, but basically what we really seen is last 4 weeks, that we did things what we have never done before in our life, especially like working remotely, working on this digital collaboration platform where we can communicate with the people, we can do remote team meetings, and so on. Now, this is also if you would have asked any of us a few months ago, probably we would have said it is not possible. But you see that, like necessity is a mother of invention, right? And now this is what the necessity and this is what allowed us to do in that direction. Apart from that is also teaches new lessons that this situation, what is there now, how long it will go on, nobody knows. And at least people say that whenever such kind of virus comes, at least it takes 1.5 to 2 years to really bring down the situation to normal. And that means that the special norms which is come by government of India, like social distancing and all, even though the lockdown will finish, maybe these social distancing things will not. I'm still on the introduction, so please bear with me on this slide. And the social distancing will not go away from us so soon. And I think even after lockdown, we may have to follow these guidelines. And that means that we have to work in our workplace still with a limited manpower or whatever is really necessary. Maybe our travel will be restricted. Maybe our communication will be all digital platform and so on. So today I just wanted to cover especially our aspect, especially our core domain of development and validations in the automotive industry. And what are the scenarios in terms of lockdown and the post-lockdown and even near future, without waiting for next pandemic to come in, how we should think, or whether this gives us an opportunity to retrospect ourselves and see whether we can use some of the good thing which this virus has brought for us. So with this, I will move on to my next slide. So today's agenda is basically what we will see in the context of validation. Is the slide moving? Are you able to see
yes,
my next slide? Yeah,
yes,
perfect.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I think today's agenda, what we will try to cover is mainly lockdown and the way forward in the context of mainly physical testing, because there are many other opportunities also possible, but today we'll restrict our presentation mainly for the physical testing, which is actually blocked completely, and what are the way forward. And today we will introduce concept of validation, about the smart validation. And what we mean by validation, that also include smart validation and verification, because many times people say we do a verification, is it not covered? But that's not true, because we are into the testing area and we do testing for verification as well as validation. So this is how we wanted to say that how whatever we are doing, can we make it a little smarter? And I use the word smart for different contexts, which I will, as I go through the presentation, I will try to explain my definition. Maybe it may be different than yours, but I will try to address mine. So in the validation, we would like to cover right from the physical asset, like the smart test cell. It can be test cell, it can be test rig, it can be an individual vehicle, or it can be any physical asset which can be used for validation, and how we can bring under that umbrellas. Then we covered the test labs, where you have multitude of this test facility, how we can work at the lab level, because the stakeholders are different. Then whatever testing we do, end of the day, we are generating the data. And that is what, to my opinion, is an asset of any organization coming out of the validation domain or validation people. So how we make the data smarter. And again, when we want to generate the data, we are actually following certain processes to bring the vehicle onto the road. We are doing the conceptualization, we do the design, then we are doing the planning, how we would like to build a vehicle or an engine. And for that, we follow a complete process. There are many software tools and technologies are used, but sometimes partly connected and sometimes partly disconnected. Then to move it further, today's concept we will restrict to the up to the lab level, but we also have experience that how we can use this concept at the enterprise level or at the complete vehicle level. At the end of the session, I would like to cover two things about the future trends, what we have seen, and how it is how it's going to impact our validation area, or how we do the validation today, and how that is likely to change in the future. And one specific topic my colleagues asked me to cover, which I worked on Germany for last 2 years, the scenario-based testing approach, which is slightly different than the conventional testing approach. And that basically initially planned was to use this for autonomous driving, but then we see there are lots and lots of use cases which can be used even for our regular testing as well. And end of the presentation, we try to keep a sufficient amount of time for question and answer and discussions. So move on. We see anyway, these are all known things. It's nothing new I'm trying to show here. Everybody, all of us, we know. That's why probably we are here for this webinar, that physical testing is installed, and we really want something. Whether can we run the facility remotely? Can we run the facility with a minimum manpower? So this is what is our wish. Then the post-lockdown, we anticipate that, as we know that we have almost lost 1 month, one calendar month, which is much more than every company has lost more than thousands of engineering man hours and testing hours. And definitely, we being into the industry where we really can't push the launches delayed, we really wanted to cover up the time which we lost. And that will call for too many test requests coming in. And then we all know that we cannot build new facilities to meet this requirement in the shortest possible time. So what people will always looking for is how we can reduce the downtime of the assets what we have, and how we can get most out of the asset what we can do. So this is where definitely the topic it is very close to my heart, that I always say that we need a digital infrastructure on top of the physical test facility, so that we can make physical test facility also a part of the digital infrastructure, where we can communicate and we can collaborate with the physical assets. So this is about the lockdown and the post-lockdown. But what is our long-term vision? Or what about the long-term situations, what we really wanted to do as an industry? And I've been talking to many people across the world with different OEMs. Even my friends here, I always have those kind of discussions. That's what is next. And everybody says that because of the global world, because of the competition, the biggest challenge for anybody is how they can reduce the validation time. And if they really wanted to do this, what is that which we can do? And there is one word which I'm hearing across the world right now. They say digital product development process. Now, what does that mean? And what it means to build a digital development process, probably this is also one long-term vision which we want to challenge. Because in our regular day-to-day activities, we are so busy that we don't even get the time to think about these kind of questions. And I feel today is probably in a way which I would like to put some food for thought for all of us, that can we think in this direction. And I taken this topic specially, mainly for, we have seen that India is known for IT technologies, but unfortunately it is not known for engineering very much. Of course it is known, but still, let's say people, when they say engineering, they always say Germany, Japan, US, and so on. And I believe that whatever advantage what we have with our digital workforce or the digital tools and technology, can we integrate it, and can we also become the world class as far as engineering and IT together, so that there is no gap between the developed countries and our side. So what is required to overcome these situations? So basically, as we said about the new normal, what we said is to collaborate a new way without compromising the quality, productivity, and the timeline. How we can make physical test infrastructure as part of our digital collaboration platform. Now, this is something very important, that, as we said, validation time we want to reduce, but we cannot reduce the validation quality or the product quality. So that means we really want to have a very seamless integration of the physical test infrastructure into the digital platform. So moving on, we try to coin a new word just to say that, okay, this is something more than conventional way of looking at the validation as a whole process. Now, today in our webinar, we see people from different streams. So it is very difficult for me. It was very difficult for me to really coming out with the words and plan which is used common across the different people who are from different domain and different function. So to start with, I would like to define our common terms, what I am using. And since it is very generic, maybe the words are common, but they are used in different contexts. So first we'll talk about what I mean by test lab or a smart test lab, a test cell. Now, smart test cell, basically nothing to do only with the test cell, but anything which is like a rig, the vehicles, the moving physical test facility, anything what you can imagine, you can think that being the test cell. Now, within the test cell, we always see that there is somebody who is operating the testing and somebody who is engineering the testing. So there are two stakeholders we try to cover in the test cell area. And of course, the person who is maintaining the test cell, that is like maintenance engineer. Then coming back to the test lab, many people use the word test lab or test facility. And again, this picture is more of a logical structure. The physical structure can be, an OEM can have a lab, which are at multi-location, or can have multiple labs, or within one lab can have multiple type of testing, and so on. So here, basically our idea is logically we can group it. And here, the stakeholders are mainly the people who are lab in charge or the facility in charge, who are responsible for providing the facility. Then there are people who are operating the facility, like the supervisor or the operators and so on. And there are test engineer and test manager who are planning the test methodology, which is to be executed on this infrastructure. So this is the area what we mean by test lab and the stakeholder there. Then we also talk about the smart data. Now that data, again, I will go a little more detail in the subsequent slide. Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, Puran san.
Yes.
Sir, I could not hear you. Your voice is very low. Could you please increase the volume?
1 second. Nirav, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I am able to.
Still the voice is very low, sir.
Yeah, now.
Yes, sir.
We are able to hear you properly. I think you need to check the internet.
Yeah, because my volume is full. My volume is full right now.
And we can hear you.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Clear. You can take at his end.
Yeah, for us it is clear.
Okay.
So it is very clear.
Okay, then please check it.
Yeah, for us
and
it's clear.
don't
It's
worry.
the volume of the laptop.
Exactly, and please, in case you don't able to hear me, don't worry. We may try to record this, and then maybe a later time we can again play back. Okay. So now I was moving on to the whole concept of validation. I divided into the test cell, the lab, the test data. So that test data, again, when I say it can be a data which is coming in from any physical infrastructure or probably for that matter, even the simulation infrastructure. So I'll try to generalize today's presentation because we have different use cases and experience where we handle different kind of data also. Then we talk about the test process. Sometimes we use the word test process or we use the validation process. Either way, you can map into your own terminology. The whole idea here is right now this picture is talking about one particular function system group, or let's say one particular domain of the our industry, let's say powertrain, or maybe let's say vehicle chassis or vehicle body. And within that, maybe we talk about engine as a one of the function group or a system group, or maybe transmission as a system group. And whenever the work is flowing from top, from the vehicle DVP up to the engine DVP, and then engine DVP, how you are really planning the whole process, that what kind of test you want to do. And then you are passing on the test, whatever you want to do to the lab, where you wanted to really plan and get that work done. And once you are doing that, you are actually sending the work down to the test cells, which is test cells or rigs or whatever, or loggers, whatever you name it. And then finally you generate the data, where you do the engineer level analysis on the data, using your analysis tool, store it, and then you link it to your upper level validation process. So this is the overall concept today we will talk. Now here I just wanted to set our base. We all have heard this word Industry 4.0 quite often. But most of the time, what our experience is that Industry 4.0, when they say, they are mainly talking about smart manufacturing. So at any point in time, they say, okay, if I have a manufacturing machine in my manufacturing line, and if I need to hook on to my MRP or my ERP, then how I can do that? So far, I have not heard any discussions that is there anybody who is really thinking about Industry 4.0 for R&Ds or validation area. So to us, for our today's discussion, I would like to use that word Industry 4.0. And Industry 4.0, what it says in summary is you should be able to give command to the device what is to be executed, and you should be able to get the feedback from the device what it has done. And also you should be able to monitor. So this is what is a very simple definition of Industry 4.0. So in our context about the validation area, we can think test cell as an IoT device like Internet of Things or Industrial Internet of Things device, and how it can be plugged into our development and validation process. So this is what I wanted to define for us, and maybe we all can discuss later whether this word is still relevant or not, or whether we need something more. So today's discussion, I will try to cover this 4 area about the test cell, test lab, test data, and test process. And I'll go one by one. And as we all know that the picture looks very rosy, very good, everything is fine. But we all know from our experience that it is not easy to implement such kind of a thing in a short time. And right now, we have different requirements. As we all know that since we lost the time, since we lost the money, now the biggest challenge is we have to run with our optimum fund, which our company has right now. And this puts a lot of pressure that, of course, you cannot initiate this kind of initiative right now at one go, but probably you may need different milestones. So we try to divide certain areas in what we can do in the short term, what we can do in the midterm, and probably what we can think about long or further long term. So this, I think all this explanation, which will go in detail, I will try to cover our view that probably how it can be realized. Yeah. So let's move on to our first topic today, smart test cell. So first, let us define what do we mean by smart test cell. And what is the KPI, or we always talk about the KPIs of people or KRAs and all. What is the KPI of a test cell? So in my opinion, what we mean by KPI or a key performance indicator for a test cell is can it deliver high quality data in an optimum possible time with effective utilization. So if you all agree to this, and I think that gives a very two important point, how to bring a high quality data of the testbed and how to run optimally with minimum downtime. So if these are the two things which is there, this is what I mean by smart test cell. That can the test cell, and when I say smart, basically, without asking, can my test cell give me some of the answers? And I think this is where I use the word everywhere, smartness, that can I get the information without even asking and can give me suggestions or recommendations or whatever. So this is what we mean by the definition of smart test cell here. So if you see on the right hand side, one of the lockdown issue what we have mentioned in the short term, that physical testing is stalled and we want to restart it. Probable solution, some keyword I would like to clarify here. We use this word remote monitoring. Now the problem is this word is very casually used by different people for different purposes. Let's say if I get a remote access to a desktop using a desktop sharing tool, they also call it remote monitoring. Now here, we have something more than what we mean by the definition of the remote monitoring. Now, remote monitoring is basically, I wanted to monitor not just the screen, but I also wanted to monitor the health of the test cell. Now, if I wanted to monitor the health of the test cell, and also I know the test cell cannot run in isolation, it should be fed from utilities. So a test cell screen cannot tell me everything because all my utilities and my safeties are not 100% connected to my automation system of the test cell. Now, so to do this in a short time, what can be done? So what can be done is, can we do some kind of application, extended application of an automation system, which allows me to take the control of the test cell? And not just one test cell, as we already discussed, that since there will be a norm for social distancing, so we will see that let's say 2 or 3 test cells operated by one operator. That means you need a remote monitoring, not just for one test bed, but multiple test bed. And that operator, since he is not highly knowledgeable as a test engineer, and since test engineer will not be available on the test bed, can he collaborate very effectively with the test engineer so that test engineer can instruct him remotely what he is supposed to do, what kind of test he is supposed to run, and he just do a job and monitor. Because as we know, the safety, if we really want to do, that needs something more. And engineer, since let's say you're running a long hour test, let's say you run a durability test running for 18 hours, and if you really want to run that kind of a test but unmanned, then you really can't sit in front of a remote desktop tool to keep watching what is happening. That means, you know, you are really looking for abnormalities. And if your automation system is capable of generating those abnormality signals, and whether it can be routed to you through the SMS or email, then you know the notification and you can have effective collaboration with the operator to handle these kind of situations. So with this limited approach, at least you can start some kind of a testing. It will not be 100%, it will not be 100% safe, but at least we can start something here. And the stakeholders involved in this is basically, as I said, about the test operator and test engineer. To limited extent, you may also need, for a midterm, the testing is already started, but safety is still at a risk and data quality is still compromised. The solution for these two is maybe if we add some very low-cost sensors in the lab to monitor the safeties and the monitoring of the utilities, then probably we can solve that problem of the risk or safety risk of running the test cell. And as far as the data quality is concerned, fortunately, most of the systems what we see around, that they are a very good automation system in place. And these automation systems can monitor whether the data is coming, the quality data. For example, you really wanted to measure, or you wanted to test start the engine, or start the test, where let's say engine is fully warmed up. And you have some checks where you say, okay, if the engine is warmed up, then only I would like to start the test. So some kind of checks you can already put in there, which is always ensuring the data quality. Because this directly affecting the KPI, because many times we hear from our customers that maybe, you know, he done the test, but maybe setting was not proper, device was not connected proper, maybe the utilities were not there, maybe the fuel has gone. So all sort kind of things can very well be planned and monitored. Of course, I'm not saying it totally depending on the capability of that particular rig. However, you can analyze and decide what all things you can add on top there. So this is what we really mean by how we can really do the physical testing and with the physical manpower, with the limited physical manpower. And here, of course, the one very important stakeholder there is a maintenance engineer, because we know an operator can operate the test facility, but if there is a problem, who is going to solve it? So it means there is another very important stakeholder who are maintaining the facility. They also need to be notified. So here again, there's functionality of SMS or notifications, or maybe limited maintenance people working on site. So they can help and they can coordinate and get it sorted out. So as far as test cells are concerned, about this short and midterm solutions, I think this is how probably we can achieve some goal in this area. Then we have some example. We talked about so far about this remote monitoring and how we can run the test cell remotely. We also talked about what is required to go from short term to midterm, about normal monitoring to a fully safe operating conditions. And if you see on the right hand side here, that you on the test bed, you have a test automation system. You may need to add safety management system if it is not available in place. You may need to have a utility monitoring minimum, which can give me an idea that whether my flows are there or not. And then I use this system for quality monitoring. And through this system, I can actually do a web-based remote monitoring of the test cells remotely. So now this is something what we mean that, okay, we can monitor the test bed remotely. We can alert the engineers about the status, about the alarms, about the progress. Now we have done some use case actually in Germany almost 2010, I guess. So almost 10 years ago. The use case was the customer is a catalytic converter manufacturer, and he's like making a catalytic converter four-wheeler. So those of you who are aware about this chassis dynamo, where we can put this vehicle on the rollers and we can run it. There, the use case was that they really wanted to, being in Germany, the biggest issue was if we wanted to run over the weekend, that's very expensive. And if it is expensive, and then again, availability of the manpower and all was an issue, whereas their testings are very routine in nature, of a repeatable nature. Then the request has come to us that can we do something about that? So that time, together with the customer, we conceptualize this concept that how about you're already using a robot, how about you put a safeties into the test lab. For example, when I run, can you please mute? Hello? Yeah. Niro, can you please ask somebody to mute, please? Niro?
Yes, sir.
Hello? Yeah. I think there is a disturbance there. Yeah. Yeah. So
Sir, now you are also in mute. Can you release your unmute?
one second. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So the requirement was there, but it was not so simple. The idea was when you wanted to run, you can imagine a vehicle running unmanned, four-wheeler running unmanned. There are many safety issues which we need to care about. And since it is running on a roller, which is steel surface, your tire cooling is important. Your tire cooling between the test cycles are important. Your fuel levels are important, where you wanted to continuously monitor whether sufficient fuel is there or not. Plus, your fire handling system is important. Your ignition control system is important. So, together with the customer, we were able to put a complete system in place. And then on Friday evening, they used to, they also, of course, have one more solution, like something called test scheduler. So they schedule all the tests in the central system, and it is connected to the automation system, which takes it, and the safety system is connected with the automation system. And they were able to run completely unmanned, and they were able to monitor the system remotely as well for the safety purpose. So the summary is like these kind of systems are possible, and since it require a lot of engineering and the safety know-how, and if we integrate that well with this kind of a technology, I think it is possible to realize this kind of a solution. So this is just a brief about how a test cell can be monitored remotely. If we do in a midterm some additional safeties, and can we do it so that, and plus more collaboration can be done. So this one is mainly about the test cells. Now we move on. So we covered the test cell part and how to make it smarter. We move on to the test lab. Now here, we are moving in from the test rig to the test lab. Now let us define what is the KPI for a test lab. So when I say about the key performance indicator for the test lab, I think what is the most important element there is how many test requests which is received from upstream are fulfilled in an optimum possible time with optimum utilization of the resources. And I think this is a key there. And this process is a very complex in nature because at the test cell, you're handling one test at a time. But at the lab level, you are handling requests coming in from n number of projects, for n number of a group, for n number of functions. And this is something which put a lot of complications, and the stakeholders, not just one. We have stakeholder like a person who is planning the facility. Of course, there are different ways in which different labs are operating. So I don't want to generalize that, but I'm trying to say that if anybody is running the lab as a service, then they get a request and they need a facility person need to manage the request and balance between the request and the test resources what he has. So he has to take care about the scheduling of the facility, the scheduling of the manpower, monitoring the utilizations of the assets what he has, closely cooperating with the maintenance group to really resolve and make sure that they minimize the downtime. So this is one kind of a user we are going to talk about. Then second is the test supervisor. At the lab level, let's say you have more than 20, 30, 40 test cells. You can't monitor by one person. You really have a clusters. So those clusters are when monitored by an individual operators or a supervisor. And then, of course, the facility may have a common utilities which need to be monitored. So many people or many labs currently what we have seen, they are at the different level of automation. So some are running still the utilities in a completely manual mode. The person goes to the utility, start everything one by one, and then start the things. Now, can you imagine that if we have limited resources, can we do this? Probably not. And if we have this kind of supervising monitoring system, it can do a more collaborative way with a supervisor talking to the operator there. Then one more stakeholder, what we see, most of the time we have seen that you have a system which are identical in nature. Let's say you have 5 engine test cell, or maybe 5 chassis dynamo, or maybe let's say 5 NVH equipment which are going to the vehicle there. Now, if these kind of things are there, we always think that why should we duplicate the work? And that also, why should we do that kind of a work on the test cell? Can it be done remotely? So this is going in the direction about, can I have a centralized planning process or a centralized place where I can store all my test sequences for the identical system, and then I can share that in whichever test cell I need. So basically the advantage for these kind of activities are mainly that you are reducing, your test bed is used only for testing purpose. You are not doing any non-productive task on the test cell. And even let's say kind of reporting and all you can generate offline. So this is, we added something new, which was never a plan of the facility or a lab manager's role. We discussed with many engineers in the past. They say, no, it is a role of a test engineer and it has nothing to do with us. But frankly, if you have a common collaboration platform, it is a win-win situation for all, because test engineer knows when he can do the test, maintenance engineer knows when he can do the maintenance, and test planner, he knows when all he need to prepare the test plan so that he can execute. So let's get into the detail about the test lab. So again, here also we divided the work into short term, medium term, and probably a long term. The reason is, again, if you want to do this tomorrow, probably you cannot. So but definitely you can do something tomorrow if something is off the shelf available and you just hook on. So as we said, in the post-lockdown, the biggest challenge what we see is the testing load is going to increase. And when the testing load is going to increase, we really wanted to see all on our feet, so that make sure that we are able to deliver. So in the step one, probably the things like scheduling and asset management utilization, which is nothing to do with the connectivity to the test cell, it can be done offline also. You can implement these kind of a solution so that at least you can smoothen one process of coordination between the facility engineer and the maintenance team. And with this, what happens is, at least we know what slots are available, when the slot is available, when the schedule will be free and not. So these kind of benefits you can get by in a phase one short-term implementation. And definitely it can help, since it is a collaborative platform, it helps to improve the utilization of the bed as well. So here the teams and the responsible people who get benefited from this is the person who is responsible for the lab, the maintenance person, and the test engineer here. In the midterm, again, as you said, the testing load is again contributed there. So how I can increase more testing without adding the new test cell? And then this is where we say, okay, whether we can monitor the bed supervisor way, and at the same time, whether we can add this remote test sequence planning kind of functionality into our lab so that we can do this work. Now here, this many times there are the questions that, okay, yes, everything looks good, but let's say I have a test cell which are from different suppliers, and how I solve this problem. So there are solutions available for this kind of a problem. That one option is you go with the supplier specific if you have multiple test cells, and then you have one common system on top, which is at abstraction level and which can communicate with the individual supplier of the test cells. So these kind of there are many approaches possible here, but we can see depending on the use case. So with this approach, what happens is you will be able to monitor the utilities. You can bring in more safety. Your maintenance is being covered, and of course you can have this test planning and the sequence planning offline. So this way we can take care about the midterm part, about the lab level, how we can make the lab smarter. So let's see the implementation case. We have done these projects number of places in a different way because every case was unique. And we had different solutions, different concepts for this, but we tried to come out with some generic applications. And here we talk mainly about, let's say, a facility person, when you want to schedule the test, it means you need some process where somebody has to put in the request in there. And when the request is there, on the other hand, you need these assets, which is available and what is the current status of those facilities and the manpower. So these kind of things you can do with this type of application, which is offline, because you can create a database for all your assets, what you have in your lab, and then you can sync up with the scheduler. Then, of course, for the maintenance point of view and the facility effective utilization, you also need some module for managing the assets, mainly for maintenance people, because they want to keep the asset uptime And they can do it only when they know exactly when the calibrations are due, when the preventive maintenance is due, what the calibration reports are. And of course, indirectly, it also helps in doing your quality audit as well. Now here, as I said, there are many stakeholders, the facility people, the maintenance people, the test engineer. And now here you need a collaboration platform that you are running a test and you found an issue with one of the equipment, how quickly you can inform to the maintenance person. So this is where these tools like issue management and all, which are tightly integrated with asset and scheduling, you can use it. Coming back to the remote supervisory monitoring, as we said, that this is not just a desktop sharing, but you are actually having an app which is communicating with the individual test cells and get the status from those test cells. And depending on the capability of the test cell, there are some test cells which can give you only monitoring information. There are some test cells which allows you a partial control of the test cell remotely. And there are some which can give you complete control. So depending on what you have, you can start from there and then you can make a strategy how you can take it to the next level. Now here the advantage what you see that suppose if it's a social distancing and if you need a minimum manpower and you want to run the complete test lab, then sometimes let's say if there is an issue with the UUTs, for example, in the test cell, can you are shutting down the UUTs remotely without even going to the test set so that the UUT not get damaged. So such kind of a use cases you can imagine that you need. And coming back to, this is also linked with this remote monitoring about the utilities and safety monitoring of the entire test lab. So as we know that we have a lot of equipments running to run the test lab, like the cooling tower, the chillers, the compressors, the fuel line, the fuel pumps, many. And what I always used to say that this doesn't cost much, but if you really do this, it allows the person to really monitor about the preventive schedules, the remote operations of the devices, so that you can operate and monitor and even control those devices remotely there. So this helps in running the facility which has a shared utilities. And of course, I mentioned about the remote test planning and syncing. And here, basically what as we said that you may have a multiple suppliers and then you may have tools. Most of the suppliers, what we have seen that they have this central planning and scheduling tool. So you can implement that so that takes away all the load from the lab there or from the test cell. So now coming back to long term, which is very interesting aspect, which I wanted to bring it. This is what will show the power of the data. Because we have seen that, okay, we built a thing, we implemented the system. Can we improve the process even further? Now, if this is the question, which is for a very long term, now we know that we have lots of data about the scheduling. We have lots of data coming from the maintenance. We also have lots of data about the utilizations. Now, can we use this data to actually help us to schedule effectively? Because as we have seen, when more and more equipments are gathered into the lab, plus number of test sequences, the test requests are coming and getting more complex, it will be very difficult for us to do some kind of a scheduling. Manually, also it's difficult because they're all interdependent. And another case is like where you use let's say one example I wanted to give here. Let's say you do a chassis dynamo test where you really need to soak the vehicle for 12 hours, and then only you can do the test on the chassis dynamo, for example, for the regulatory test. Now, if this is the case, I always say the scheduling is always easy, but it is the rescheduling which is a pain. And why it is a pain? Because if I want to reschedule the test, I cannot just see the schedule of that particular lab, but also I need to see the schedule availability in the soak room, the available space in the soak room. So like these kind of a problem, if you want to address, and this is where you can really use this new concept about this artificial intelligence or machine learning, where you can use it to give you the advantage of whether you can do manual assist. It can give you the recommendations, or it can even think about smart over a period when you get more data, and all these can use machine learning for that. So this is for a very long-term perspective. And as I said that today's webinar, I wanted to cover the long-term aspect also. So at least it will give us a thought how we can use this technology for our advantage. So we have covered up to the test lab here, the different stakeholders of the test lab. Now let's move on, which is a very favorite topic and very controversial topic and very difficult topic for me always. That is smart test data. Let's define first what is mean by smart test data. Now here is many people have a different meaning to the test data. Sometimes they consider the file which is coming from the test cell is a test data. Sometimes they create a report out of the raw data and that they call it a test data. Sometimes they create a consolidated report of the test completion and they call that as a test data. So what exactly is the test data? And what kind of data we are talking about? So let us see that I always used to use one word called what is data, what is information, and what is knowledge. So let's see in this context how this equation fits here. First of all, we have an immediate problem that, okay, we have done the test, but right now the test data is in the test bed and I don't have access to the test bed. The second scenario is I have done the test data is there, but it is an individual engineer's laptop in the native file folder, what he only remembers. That is the second level of scenario. So now, even though I have done the test, I have the data, and from most of my colleagues who knows that when they worked on Euro 6, they know what kind of a volume of data they are generating. And every day they are changing this data set and they renaming the file name and they store it in the local computer. So how long you can remember which test on which day, what configuration you have done and stored. So that means the data, if I take it from the test cell as it is without any information, to me, it is just a simple plain file or a plain data, which doesn't tell me anything except some numbers. So here, the important aspect is your data always needs some contextual information, which is help you to search for the data, to look for the data from the information point of view. So when you get the data and you put this contextual information, attach the contextual information to the data, store the data in a way which any engineer can access in any tool what he likes. Now, this is one thing I always say, that engineering data is a data. It doesn't understand whether it is coming from tool A or tool B or tool C. Because, for example, your time series data is always remain time series data, whether using any tool. If you use a frequency domain data, especially in NVH area, it's always remain frequency domain data. And same way, your crank angle data is always remain a crank angle data. So if that is the case, why we don't store the data in a standard format, which can be accessed by any tool? So this is an important aspect there, which we mainly talk about how really need to manage the data, which is accessible at any time by any engineer, because the side effects and the benefits are many, because people can get idea anytime, and he would like to see some data and they wanted to see whether his validation or any design improvement is required, whether he can do that or not. So this is one area what we always try to say, work on the standard. There are some very nice standards from Germany, from that organization, who define the standard for how to store engineering data as a data, not as a file, not as a text, not as a CSV file. And then you can use any tool. There are some generic tools like DIDM from National Instrument, MATLAB from MathWorks. There are domain-specific supplier tool like Concerto from ABL. There are NVH tool from test.lab from LMS. So what I figured out that these all tools are coming from Europe, and this standard is also coming from Europe. So most of the tool suppliers are already complying to this standard. So this is like a setting up your data management process, which is independent of the tool supplier. So in the short term, what we can do, we know that we cannot put a physical network infrastructure onto the lab shortly. Plus, we cannot do this data import from the testbed automatically. So we can start with a manual import. Put one machine, put the data into one particular folders, and then you run an import process to import the data into the central data management system with a web application so that anybody can access the data from anywhere, and then they can connect any analysis tool into this. So this is how we see the importance of the data, because you don't get locked down in the lockdown because your data is locked in the either testbed or in the engineer's PC. So this is how you see the benefits there. The data is always available on the web. You can have now tools available which can connect directly to data and do the analysis there. So this is a short term. The long term always remains the same. Only thing what you are doing is you are improving the process of importing the data from manual to automatic. You have some mechanism where the moment the test is finished, you can run an importer which can import the data directly into the central server automatically. Now for this, there is some work required. That is why I put into the midterm. But the advantage what you get is the human intervention. And many times we have seen, it is not the intention of the human not to put the data into the central server, but sometimes it is because of the lost opportunity, or maybe they forgot to add it. Now those kind of things won't happen. And at least you can get the data into the system. Now there are many complications, many way of storing data, many type of data you can store. Let's say we always hear about a word like MDF file or ATFX file or CSV file or Excel. You can import any kind of a data. So, I mean, this is one thing what we have learned in the last 15 years, that it's possible to do it. Let's move on to the long-term perspective. Now, long-term, what you say, okay, I got the data, I can do the analysis automatically now. Now, the next point here is, even when I want to do analysis for a small data, it is okay. We all know from our experience with the Excel world that we engineers can't trust one person created Excel by second person. The reason is the formulas are all hidden, they are complex. If anybody make any change, we don't trust those calculations. So it's very important that calculations are not just piece of calculation, but this is the engineering knowledge again. So if you really want to do that knowledge management also, can you have some kind of automatic post-processing of the standard calculation in nature? Standard calculation means we talked about in emissions, we talked about the regulatory calculations. Instead of doing it on the individual by individual engineer, can it be done on the central server there? And can you do this automatically so that your engineer don't have to waste any time of doing this calculation manually again? So such kind of things you can think about the long term. Then we see about the use case. We come across these use cases, and I believe a number of use cases we have done. Now this picture what I'm showing you on the screen is mainly about logical flow. That you may have a number of test bed, multi-locations. From the multi-location, you can bring in the data into the cloud. The server can host into the cloud, and your engineer's PC can connect to that. So this is just one example. Likewise, there will be many combinations possible, which can allow you to bring the data into centralized server. Now here one word of caution, a very important word of caution, what we have learned from our experience, that sometime don't try to put data all in one single server, because people have an impression that if I put all the data in one single server, one physical server, then I can give access to everybody. But the situation is not that. You can still realize the same solution in a different way. And my suggestion always goes that if any durability group is there, set up a server for durability group separate, set up the group for emission group separate, set up the group for engine calibration separate. The reason is, even though the data looks same, but the analysis are very specific to that particular domain. And once you do that, we have a technology which allows you to connect different servers. And then even though the data are distributed, but you can access from the single location. Now, these are maybe, I think today's seminar, I think it will be very hard for us to cover too many things in detail. Our idea is if there is an interest there, then probably we can have follow-up webinars on each individual topic, and we can go much more detail into that. Yeah. So one important element here is, which I have not mentioned in my beginning, of the assumptions. Now, one assumption which is very clear, that all the solutions which I am showing today, they are all within the umbrella of the information security of the organization. Now, this is where we work very closely with your IT group within your company. And then we take their best practices, they take our best practices, and they try to make it. Now, for example, I think this question is very relevant because usually security is there, but at the same time, you know now that you are working remotely from home. That means you have access to all your engineering data from the company in your system. Now, if this is the case, which is possible, why not you can have the same data also in a similar fashion, which you can access. So there are lots and lots of security measures available right now. There are a lot of firewall concepts are available there. A lot of VPN technologies are available there, which allows you to establish these processes. So that I think I'll take this question a little later, but I think one thing I can assure you that these all will fall within the information security with the IT policies of the company. Now, sometimes there is a challenge because many IT policies are very generic in nature. They just put like a blanket. Whereas there are some limitations that there are certain IT policies cannot be followed on the test cell. For example, your virus check. Now we know that if you do the virus check, you slow down the PC, it is not allowed. So then there are other mechanisms which can be done. But we have to work very proactively with the IT department and try to solve these kind of issues there. So this was one of the use case which we have done, and for multi-locations and building the data and then do the kind of analysis and even connectivity with the tools there. And mind you, these test beds, what I've shown here, 1, 2, 3, 4, they are not from one supplier. They are all from 3 or 4 different suppliers. This word called DTM is like a data transfer manager. That is what is our application, which map the data into a standard company-specific engineering data and then import into the server. Now, this is very, very important because these are all we have learned in the last 15 years. What are the complications which can come and how to handle this? Move on. Now, this is one very interesting thing I would like to bring it here. I think we have seen this last 20 years, the increase in data volume on the test cell. I still remember my days when I started my career in automotive. There was no computer on the test cell. This was written by manually. Then the computer came, they were doing only an Excel sheet which is 10 kilobyte. Now today, when we are doing this emission test, log all the ECU data, log all emission data, the file size goes in megabytes. And you do few tests, one particular bed itself will generate huge amount of data. And then when we talk about doing the data on the road data collection, one single test will generate gigabyte of data. Now, if this is the kind of a volume which is coming, and I will show in my future trend, which will increase much more because I have seen another spectrum about autonomous driving and what kind of data volume they're talking about. Mind you, our current thinking of standalone server is not going to work simply because the sheer volume and velocity of the data. And if we really want to manage that kind of a data, people always talk about this word called big data. I spoke to many of the OEMs, many of the IT department OEMs, and they said, yes, we can manage in big data. We have big data technologies. We can do that. Please understand, all these technologies which are there for big data were never designed for handling engineering data. They were all designed to handle social networking data, which are small size, but high volume in transaction. And our world is completely different. We have a small transaction, but high volume data. Another important aspect is we always see our data as a structured binary data. Let's say you look at an MDF file, you cannot open in a text editor. It's a binary file. If they're binary files, you cannot split those files. So if this is the kind of a thing which comes, and you also seen right now the test beds say not just one test data, but test data, ECU data, many combustion data, you see many kind of data there. Now, if you really want to handle that kind of a data, you have two challenges. The challenge one is how to store that high volume data. Because many times we hear the complaint from the engineers, oh, my hard disk is full. I cannot do anything. Can we do the backup? Backup do, but how long? So you really need an infrastructure which is scalable in nature in terms of the storage. At the same time, can we imagine that if you have one Excel sheet, we can analyze manually. If this data coming in gigabytes, can we analyze the data manually? Now, here is a point. This is what this slide is very, very, very important because we have created this infrastructure from the scratch, specially designed for engineering data, which is high volume in nature, how to manage the data in a clustered approach so that you can see there is a parallel import possible so that you have a cluster machines, your data can import parallelly, different kinds of data. Now here there is one technology of clustering, which we have developed from scratch. Then there is another thing here, all a centralized distributed database. Sorry. So now in the distributed database, basically it takes care about when you are importing the data, it knows exactly which data is stored where. And then for this, we have partnered with an American company. And this is one new technology called graph databases. I don't know how many of you are aware of that. This is like conventionally we use Oracle. This is like a RDBMS, like relational databases. Now here we use this completely new technology, which allows me to connect multiple clusters. It allows me to connect multiple clouds. It allows me to connect different databases and so on. And now this kind of technologies, we have partnered with American company who make that tool and we use it our product. There is another partnering here. We know this company and we know the tool very well called MathWorks. And we have a tool, MATLAB. And many times we know that the analysis is common in nature. And can we have, MATLAB have a distributed processing architecture, but they don't have a distributed data storage architecture. So we partnered with them, we built a solution. So any MATLAB program which is run in a single input and multiple data, you can run in parallel. Now, these are the two use cases which say how to store high volume data and how to process high volume data. Now, the use case is mainly R&D test fleet data, which we are trying to experiment with one customer, that you have a fleet of vehicles running into the road with different routing and different road networks, and every day they run the repeats. The idea is to collect the durability cycles for, let's say, a powertrain or for transmission, for example. Now, if you're getting the data every day and you really want to analyze manually, oh, which gear, how many kilometer, what is the peak torque has come, how to find that manually, it will be a nightmare. So you can build analysis and then you run it in parallel on, let's say you run 50 vehicles, you run on 50 vehicle parallel, and in no time you can get your analysis and durability cycle, which you can run on your test cycles. So this is just one example. There are many of this sort which we have come across, and we are just working on it right now, that how to handle high volume data processing. So we have covered the smart test data part of it right now. I think there are lots and lots of topic here and too much detail. My sincere apology for you all to feed with lots of information, some too deep IT, but I will try my best to cover up this last section about the test process. So what we mean by the test process and how we can make it smarter. Now, what we really see is the test process or a validation process. The request what we are getting in the lab is actually the result of some high level validation plan. So with the validation plan can be at the complete company level, can be at the individual subsystem level, or can be at the component level. So if we create that, we always know there are different stakeholders involved there. You have a designer involved there, you have a development engineer involved there, you have a validation engineer involved, and probably you have a test engineer involved there. Plus, there are many authorities which approves the plan because it's very, very critical, because that decides what kind of a testing you need to do. And if this is the process, we know that this process currently, most of the companies we have seen, except few companies where they say they can do it in PLM. But what we have realized that here you need a tight integration with the physical assets. And this is one link which is always missing. And it comes only up to a high level DVP and then stop. Now here, you can imagine that the DVP create the test schedule. It goes at the lab level for the scheduling. But before getting the DVP, you can run through the whole process of checking, approving, and that process. Then this after approved DVP goes to the lab or maybe multiple labs for execution, and the data comes back. So here I will just see briefly that, okay, DVP means what? We are really trying to work out the project content or the scope, what we want to validate. And that scope then again translated into the test request. And then the test requests are getting executed on the test rigs or simulation rigs and so on. Now, this allows us to complete seamless integration and make that process smart, because every feedback from bottom is feed into the upstream. Let's say the test is completed, how much test is completed, how much level of validation we are right now, and those kind of questions you can answer with that. So here the stakeholders are, as I said, if it is a system level, it can be HODs, the design team, the project teams, and of course, the most critical element, what people always care about, is DVP reports. How many release, how many part release, whether reports are released or not. Releasable report also have an approval process. So all those things you can manage in an integrated approach. Or you should manage an integrated approach so that you get a clear visibility across the people which is involved in this validation and development area. So one use case here about the test process, we all know that is emission certification process. And this use case I always refer, mainly because of it has all the possible complexities in this. Let's say in India, we are talking about two-wheeler, three-wheeler, four-wheeler, passenger car, commercial vehicle, tractor engines, and so on. And you want to do the certification for emissions. Now we know, and plus it's a dynamic world, because we talk about Euro 2, 3, 4, and now we move on to 6. And I don't know what not will come in the future. So it's like a dynamic world. But the good thing is there are very well-defined processes. That if you want to do a Euro 4 certification for a passenger car or Euro 6 certification for a passenger car, what kind of a tests are required, how to conduct the test, what kind of data you need to get, what kind of analysis you want to do, what kind of certification when you want to issue, what you can do. So this use case we have done for one certification authority where they have number of labs, different locations. Plus they also go to the third party and inspect the system. Plus their engineers goes to the OEM's place and do the certification. The challenge here was the calculation engine is the most complex and the critical one. and that calculation has to be validated because it's a regulatory test. So we designed the whole system, I remember 15 years ago. Now it's getting under renovation for Euro 6 now. The idea here is all the calculations are centralized, irrespective of the automation system. There are few labs running with our automation, the few are running with the other automation supplier, but the calculations and all are centralized there. Now here, all the stakeholders, right from HODs, the test engineers, the test operators, everything is integrated. All the tests, what tests need to be conducted are all standardized. All calculation need to be standardized. All reports, what they need to generate based on the validation criteria about the pass or fail is all automated. And there is a one more layer on top. Usually we know in emission, we don't do just one test and decide. If it fail in one, you may have to go to second. If you fail in second, so that kind of a workflow is also been implemented there. So, and in a disconnected mode, let's say an engineer go to an OEM place, but he want to do the same calculation. So we have given some kind of a planning mechanism which you can take into his laptop, feed the data there, do the calculation engine also is deployed onto his laptop so that he can do the calculation and generate the result then and there. So there are many combinations. See, the idea here to show there are different ways in which these systems can be configured and can bring the efficiency. And the most important message, if you see across my webinar today, is all about collaboration between the stakeholders. So we covered this test process part now. So we have covered cell, lab, data, and process. Now, the long-term vision. Let's say we have defined this on the right-hand side about the test process, lab process. Can it be scaled up across the different function group, different domain? Domain means a vehicle will have a domain, for example, powertrain, chassis, engine, electrics, and so on. In powertrain, you may have different function group called durability, performance, emission, transmission, and so on. And every function group actually follow a validation life cycle. So what is the meaning of the validation life cycle here? Validation means they start with, let's say, some simulations, then they do a component level simulations, then they do a system level simulations, then they arrange the full system like an engine and do an engine test bed, then they put that engine on the vehicle and do the vehicle test, and so on, and on road. So this is what I call as a validation life cycle, which is very, very critical because one of the questions which we want to answer in this webinar, how I can reduce the validation time. And you can imagine this is just one function group. Likewise, you can have a different function group connected to the domain and different domain connected to the enterprise. Now, this one is purely we talk about the validation. So this is why we use the word PVM, called Product Validation Management. Now here, many times we have lots of argument and discussions about what is in PLM, what is in PVM, what is PLM, what is PVM, but there are very well-defined boundaries. PLM is mainly taking care about the designers, about the CAD data, the BOMs, and so on. And here we talk about the DVPs, the validation plans, the test data, the integration of the test data, and so on. So this is a food for thought for the future. This architecture, what I'm showing you on the screen right now, it is completely conceptualized almost 10 years ago at one of the Japanese global passenger car OEM. And right now, the phase 1 is rolled out for a complete powertrain that has durability, performance, emissions, NVH, transmissions, electric drive, fuel cell. Like all those groups, we come up with a common architecture and they just deployed it across. So this is a real use case which we have tried to achieve at that scale. So with this, I think we are able to see the different processes part and how we can extend. Now coming to the last part of the presentation where we say, okay, I think we all know this. Important thing is how it is impacting our work. So we have seen this in automotive technology side. We see a powertrain evolution where IC engines, gasoline, diesel, hybrid, then we move on to electric, and then probably in future we move to fuel cell. So this is one way of the evolution. The another evolution what we see is in automation in driving. Like right now a manual driver is driving. In advanced countries we have seen the driver assistance systems, like where emergency braking and all. Then in future they're also working on autonomous driving, like a full automation. So how it means to us. And we also seen the trend that individually owned to shared mobility. Now all these things, it's all fine, but how it matters to us in the validation area. Now this is what we have seen, that when we talk about the powertrain evolution, practically if you see, any validation will require the test facility if it is a physical validation. We'll have a test lab. We'll have a test process. So whatever architecture what I have shown today will still hold good even for future generation of powertrains. So this is one very important area. Now, as we said, that this is one aspect that whether it will be still relevant. And second thing is we have seen that more and more testing people want to bring upstream, that currently we are doing a test on road, running a vehicle or the fleet vehicle on the road from point 1 to point B, collect the data and then try to extract the drive cycle and then see whether we can run it into the engine lab, for example. Now here, that means we have to bring all the testing what they do at the vehicle level. Can it be done at the upstream? I've seen very nice systems in Europe where people are talking about powertrain in the loop, that the powertrain is there or a vehicle is there, a vehicle in the loop, like only chair without body. And then you can do all kind of calibration about the ABS calibration, the engine calibration, the drivability calibration. So if these things are coming, basically it puts a less load and you can reduce the validation time. So for that, it's very important. If you want to do this, you really need a validation life cycle where you can feed the data from the bottom to the upstream and keep improving the upstream model, because it looks very simple, but it's all end of the day is a software model, and software model are totally depending on the data what we generate. And if the data is not good, the model will not be good and the result will not be accurate. So this part is mainly about how this validation area will impact us. The second topic, what we also discuss about the data volume, the volume and variety and the speed at which we are getting the data. And we can imagine that every vehicle is fitted right now with some kind of intelligence where it can send the data back to our cloud. Now, important thing is how to bring the data into our development environment, because in the past we used to run our fleet vehicle and get the trains, what kind of critical situation is coming, and then how we can simulate and validate in the lab. Now here we have an advantage that if the vehicles are fitted with IoT device, if they're giving it the data can give us an insight what kind of a new test scenarios are coming and whether we can test in the lab. So this one is also an important challenge will be there for us. And then coming back to more toward ADAS and AD area, what we have seen that regulator will not allow this vehicle to come on the road if they are not safe. So what do we mean by safety in terms of ADAS vehicle or AD vehicle? It means that they have to take any single possible traffic scenario, and under that condition, whether the vehicle is controlling itself safely or not. If not, then you cannot run. And this is where there is a new concept, what we have learned, or what I have learned in last 2 years. There is a driving scenario-based testing. So I'll try to cover little one slide on this, just to show how relevant it is in our current work also. So we have seen to problem for more data, we have a high volume data engineering platform. For this validation lifecycle, we have a PVM platform there. And for future, for a scenario-based testing, there are new standards on which we are working on. I'll just show that in a minute about what does it mean by scenario-based testing. So we have seen in scenario-based testing, what we have seen is basically we are talking about ADAS system. So ADAS is nothing but what we call the driver-assisted system, advanced driver-assisted system in some cases. So there are fewer use cases that we know cruise control. But let's say if you do an adaptive cruise control and your vehicle speed has to be regulated based on the vehicle in the front. And same is the case for automatic emergency braking, that when the vehicle stops in the front, how your vehicle applies the brake automatically. Same is the case for lane departure warning, that the driver is not concentrating, then how it can give warning to avoid the accidents. And of course, lane keep. So these are a few of the examples. Now here, why am I showing you this picture? The important thing is whatever validation we are doing in the lab, actually, we are trying to bring a real traffic scenario, critical cases, generalize it and execute in our test bed. This is what we do as of today. Now, imagine that if this, and plus at the same time, when you wanted to run on the road also, you do the road validation and check whether my vehicle is performed safely. The example of, let's say, autonomous driving. Now, in this picture, if you see, there is the same traffic scenario. There are 4 cars or 3 cars, but at a different time of the day, in the clear morning, evening, late evening, and rainy day. Now, if I want to test my autonomous car for all these 4 different scenarios, probably one way is I have to wait one day so that I can see all the 3 type of scenario. I also may have to wait if I'm in a summer, I have to wait till the rainy season comes and the rain comes and I do the testing. Now, if these kind of things, if I wanted to do it, practically there will be endless scenarios and I cannot do it. And if I cannot do it, regulator will not allow me to sell it. And for that, what I've seen that the driving simulator based testing, where they will create a different traffic scenarios, and under that traffic scenario, they validate the driving function. Of course, that doesn't stop them that they have to do a physical testing for sure, but they can do a maximum scenario coverage in the virtual world itself. Now, how does it relevant to us? The question is, let's say I've taken that example that we have a vehicle which is running from point A to point B and is driven by a driver, and we collect the data. And then we see the driver behavior, and then accordingly we try to normalize the cycle and run on the engine test bed so that you can do the vehicle simulation. Now the question here is that driver has seen only one traffic scenario. Now, if I wanted to create different traffic scenario, and then I wanted to see how the driver behave, and accordingly, if I wanted to create the cycle, those will be probably more coverage in the lab, which we can do. So this is just a food for thought. It's just an idea. I don't know. I have some feeling by my experience right now working with this scenario-based testing that probably there is a possibility that we can do that. So the scenario-based testing, the last aspect is, as I mentioned during my presentation about is iASYS as an organization. It's a non-profit organization from Germany. They promote various standards. Many of the standards probably you might have seen, this SF3 standard, A2L file, MDF file, they are all coming from this organization. Their data management standards all coming from this standard. Now, last 1.5 years, they've come up with a new domain called simulation domain. And we are fortunate enough to be part of that. And this picture, what you see on the left, was a contribution from our side to the Assam community, that how they should make different standards, how they can connect. And there is one very important aspect on the left that's called OpenX ontology and domain model. So this is one thing, is like how to describe the knowledge of the road traffic in a way which a computer can understand. And we are working continuously on this area. So there are various standards, like scenario is describing the driving scenario. The drive is basically defining the road networks. The CRG is specific for the road surface. Now, when you're collecting the data from the real data, then you really need to get only sensor data. That sensor data you cannot use as it is. Then you really need to identify objects. Let's say we have video data, which car is there, what speed is going, and then use this to describe the scenario. And once you created a scenario, then you can, in the driving simulator, you can run this scenario. But the challenge is you can run the scenario like a video game, but that's not enough, because that video game should also generate my simulated sensor signal, and that is what that OZ is standard for. And this allows me to test a driving function. So, of course, we don't want to go into the detail of this. The message is there are a lot of standardization is happening, and this is the direction where the autonomous validation is going on right now. And many times when I talk this, many people say to me that in India, autonomous driving, no chance. But I got a very interesting answer from one of my Japanese customer, and he said that probably autonomous driving is the most important in India because your accidents are happening because of the driver. And if there is no driver, then there will not be any accident. So with this comment from my my Japanese customer, I was really, it gave me food for thought to think. And of course, it will not be for a regular traffic, but definitely certain areas that can come in not near future, but long future. So we covered all this today as far as these different areas are concerned. I hope I'm able to cover different addresses, different type of questions you may have in mind. And to do all these things, it is not possible to do it with one competency. And there will be a lot of collaborations are required. So many years ago, we coined this word, the PVM way, or the product validation management way of thinking. And if you think that how you can connect testbed to your process, then only you can achieve the real objective of bringing the validation time faster down. So you really need the competency in engineering, the software competencies, the technology competencies, the automotive testing technology competencies. And in last 21 years, we were just continuously learning, still learning, and probably we have to learn little more to really see our dream come true. So with that note, thank you very much for